Hello everyone, thank you for joining. For those of you who don't know, my name is Nick Wright and I head up the data function here at Burn Sheehan. Also, for those of you who also don't know, Burn Sheehan is a technology recruitment company and we specialize in both contingent and on-site solutions across all things tech, including development, testing, technical operations, DevOps, product delivery, mobile, UX, senior hires, and of course, data. For those of you who haven't tuned in before, this is the 13th installment of our Tales in Tech webinar series, where we engage with leading technologists in their areas to discuss relevant topics delivered by a specialist. This week, it is with great pleasure that I get to introduce Dheeraj Bhadani. Dheeraj is currently a principal engineer at Mintel, one of the global leaders in market research and intelligence, predominantly in the FMCG space, and they have a presence and offices all over the world, including here in London, Chicago, and Hong Kong. Prior to joining Mintel, Dheeraj was the global lead engineer for the world-renowned Double Negative, one of the market leaders in VFX and visual animation. During his time there, Dheeraj worked on a number of box office hits in a lead engineer capacity, including Marvel's Avengers Endgame, Thor Ragnarok, and Assassin's Creed. He also acted as the product owner on a piece of technology called Adam, which is a critical part of digital disc recorder, which went on to win an Oscar for its contribution to film in the technology and science category. He's also an accomplished speaker at various meetups, including Cloud Native London and Python London, which certainly leaves us in good hands, as today Dheeraj is going to be talking to us about Python and GCP, which he's been working on recently, and how that can contribute towards serverless computing. Following his presentation, we'll be doing a 10 to 15 minute Q&A, so feel free to use the question category on the webinar to ask any relevant questions. And of course, over to you, Dheeraj.
Well, thank you very much, Nick, for the kind introduction. And here we go. So hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Today we are going to talk about the serverless computing with the GCP using the Python. I think Nick have given a very detailed information. I'm not going to reiterate the same again. Yeah. So in today's agenda, we are going to talk about the introduction to the serverless technology, followed by Google Cloud Platform Service portfolio, what kind of services which Google provides. And then we will specifically focus on the compute serverless offering from Google, following by a demo. And then there will be a Q&A. So what is a serverless technology? Serverless technology computing is in a paradigm shift in the application development, and it enables developers to writing in a code without worrying about the underlying infrastructure. Historically, when we develop an application, we have to think about the underlying infrastructure right from the procurement to all the stuff. But when we go for the cloud and the serverless technology particularly, we need not to worry about these things. Cloud hosting provider will take care of. Why serverless technology? Well, it gives us a zero server management. That means we need not to worry about all the infrastructure. It has no upfront provisioning. That means it's a huge cost reduction. There is no capital investment included into that. Auto scaling. If we get in a very popular part of the website or in a game or anything, auto scaling is another feature. We pay only for the resource what we use. Now, let's take a look on some of the use cases where serverless makes much more sense. If we have a stateless HTTP application, it becomes much more relevant. For the web part, for the mobile part, IoT backends where we have to lift and scale much larger data sets. Batch and stream data processing, it becomes again as an IoT part. And if you have to do any batch stream, chatbots and many more use cases for the serverless applications. Now, let's take a look at the GCP serverless portfolio. Now, these are the many categories where GCP provides and services. As you can see, it has a database and storage, machine learning and AI, smart assistant and chats, DevOps, messaging, data analytics, and compute. Today, we will be focusing on the compute. So within the compute, GCP provides Cloud Run, which is in a serverless containers. It provides App Engine standard, which is to host an HTTP-based serverless applications. You can write code in various languages. With the cloud functions, which is in a serverless functions, or we can say FAS, function as in a service. Also, it's useful for the events. So today we will go deeper into the cloud function and see what kind of a functionality that provides. Now it's in a serverless execution environment for building and connecting the cloud services, which means that it is in a very small code which we can run. We need not to worry about any of the underlying infrastructure. We can write our code, we can give it to the cloud function, and it will run for us. It's in a very simple single purpose functions which we attach for the cloud infrastructure and the services. It triggers on an event based watch. Cloud function can be written using the JavaScript, Python 3 and Go. Now today I'm going to demonstrate in a small piece so that we can see that how it functions and how easy it is to write in a service. The architecture which we are going to follow, we have a command line interface which will connect to a GCP cloud storage, which is an object storage service provided by GCP. That will trigger in a function called reformat image, which just do a reformatting on an image and then save it to the another cloud storage bucket, which named as in a process. So with that, let's start going into the demo. So over here, we are assigning the project IDs and creating the buckets. As you can see, we are creating buckets and can go to the browser and see if we have any buckets. Yeah, they have been created for us. It's brilliant. Here we have the main function. So when we create in a cloud function, we need to have a main.py file if you're using Python, and that will contain the code and requirement files which has the dependency. So if I'm running this, it will generate a main.py file for me, and here is a requirement files. With the gcloud functions command, I can deploy that. It is deploying, and we could go. As you can see, it is loading. It takes a couple of minutes, I believe. We can see in the log, it takes up to 2 minutes to show you. While it is generating the new version, we can take a look on the triggers. It will show us over here. The source code will be shown over here, which is the same as main.py, which we set. The permissions, we can see over here who can use this. And then if you would like to test something without even trying or calling in the HTTP based, this allows us. So this is a place where we can pass the argument if we have anything, and we can test the function over here. I believe it is, yeah. So we have got that. Now to test that, we are going to upload an image, which we can see if we have anything already in the source. No, we don't. All right. So let's copy that from the internet. I have copied it, and now I'm going to upload that to the source bucket. Yeah, you can see we have got an image. And now if I will go back to functions, it must have been triggered by now. think so. It was super quick. Let's take a look onto the processed. Yeah, we have got an image over here which is already processed. So as you can see, we not do anything. As soon as we have uploaded onto the source file, it already triggered. And now if we will go back to functions and see in the logs, you can check the logs from here. It was triggered. It was all okay. And we can see it was called over here. So that way we can make sure that it was triggered and it is. And if you need to debug, now further, we'll so the trigger type over here is in a cloud storage, which says like, so it can be an HTTP based trigger. It can be in a trigger based on an event, which is what we have. So, and it says like it is associated with the project -source bucket, and event is a finalization / create. If we want to create something from here, you can create in a function from the web console as well. Can give it a name. We can give it in a region. By default, which I used was the set on my lab, the default location or the region of my project. As I was talking about, the trigger could be based on the HTTP. It could be from the PubSub, which is a serverless offering from as a messaging service from Google. Cloud storage, which is what we had, and there are a lot of some in the beta phase. So Google is continuously developing this part. We can have the based on the authentications, and if I'm creating an HTTP, then it will give me an URL. If we will hit this URL, it will trigger this function, which is again one way of using this thing. Now we talked about the trigger. We were talking about the resource preview. Okay, that's strange. Well, how could everything work on a live demo? Let me quickly refresh and see if that works. If not, it suggests me to download the zip and then see. For some reason it is. No. Worries. Permissions, we took a look that who can call these things, and the testing part, as I said, if we have something based on the HTTP and everything, we can call it from here. Now editing in a function, so it is by default as a version control. We can go to the active one, and the way it works is, so this is version 7 is the current one. If for the rollback perspective, when we put something on the production, we need to have something which the mechanism by which you can either roll back if anything goes wrong, or to look in a history. So it does all the versioning already for you until it comes to an working production version. It will keep the previous version, and you can quickly roll back to that version. Currently it is showing as an active. If I would have anything which was not working, it would have shown me over here. Now, logs, we took a look. Now, I believe this is a new interface. Google have recently updated this thing, which is nice. Over here, we can see in a log based on the time series, which is in a very standard way of looking. And then here we have a filters. If we want to filter by, let's say, for any particular type or any file or anything, then we can do this thing based on the severity. If we want to filter down, just to see how many debugs we have put or what kind of debug formats we have got. So this is again handy when it comes to debugging, looking what exactly had happened to this thing. On the left, it gives us the log dashboard, which comes with some pre-built. It allows us to create more. We can customize those things. Cool. So with that, I'll pause over here and I'll start taking the questions from here on. Thank you very much for listening, guys.
Thanks a lot for that, Dheeraj. So yeah, we'll give the audience just a second to send some of their questions in. And I'll hopefully remember where the Q&A function is, because this is the first time that I've used this. So. Okay, Dheeraj, so what do you see as being the main benefits of going serverless?
As I mentioned on the slides and earlier discussed, we need not to procure any of the hardware, so there is a less capital investment. It makes much more sense when you have a startup where things becomes like the capital investment becomes much more crucial part to write or develop something, and the cost could also come to a zero. So for example, if you are using the resources, that means that you are paying. If you are not, then you are not paying anything, right? So there is an operational and there is a capital on the cost savings, which are the key motivation factor for which people are using.
Good stuff. And the next one is, how many levels of reporting would you usually have? Just the info and notice, or many more?
I believe this question is more of a logging part, right?
Hope so. If it is from that perspective, so it is from the logging side.
Yeah. So in the notice, in the this thing, I believe it could go onto the errors info. Would you say there are more benefits on the GCP?
Yeah, so would you say there are more benefits with GCP than with any other platforms like Azure/AWS? That might be quite difficult for you to answer that one, Dheeraj.
I mean, I have a limited knowledge about all the others like Azure and AWS. I have worked primarily with the GCP.
Mm-hmm.
But I do remember that they also have a serverless offering.
Yeah. And then from Madhan, what's the ideal logging strategy to use in serverless mode?
So within the Google do provides a tool which is purely for the logging perspective. You could access those. You can create a metrics. You can create an alerts based on those things.
Good stuff. How do you, this is kind of for myself, but how do you, when Google brings out, when Google brings out kind of new aspects of kind of GCP, etc., how do you go about kind of, actually, sorry, we'll go to this actually, because it's just a follow-up. What is the pricing for those? I think that might be pricing.
Pricing for the logging, do you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. So they are available in the pricing calculator. I don't remember from top of my head. I can quickly check for you if you want on the particularly, but Google do provides a pricing calculator. If you will just search for that and look for the pricing, it has the service called a stack driver, and it has a monitoring, tracing, logging, debugging, all the services associated with that.
Yeah. So what I was going to say is kind of when there's kind of GCP or Google Cloud will bring out kind of a new product, what's the process that you'll go through at, say, Mintel, for example, of actually deciding, testing what you'll be kind of using now and then in the future, for example?
So in a typical world, I mean, people generally start testing or looking out the technology and do some proof of concept and see whether that solves a problem. Then from there onwards, it generally goes as an MVP, which is minimum viable product, and then start seeing. And it's an iterative process, I would say, just by getting to know some of the initial phase from the technology perspective, what benefit or what kind of a problem it solves, to reaching out to the production.
Yeah,
That's in a general way.
From another person here, in your experience, is there a good interest in serverless technology like this across the industry? Is it being widely adopted, especially given COVID? This might not be a priority now for some companies.
It's an interesting one. So particularly, I am not following how the trends are going for this technology, but looking at the benefit and what I have seen in some of the rising companies By rising companies, I mean the startups who are going. Many of the companies they are using morely for the microservice-based architecture because it gives them the flexibility to put in a particular piece of code into one thing and it does exactly one thing. And it also gives them the flexibility of the elasticity. If they want to scale that up to I mean, Google does say you can scale from your scratch to the MVP to the planet scale without doing anything.
Yeah, I think from the market perspective on that one, I think Mintel specifically, you guys obviously being in FMCG, you guys have kind of done quite well out of COVID, etc. So maybe for your engineering function, etc., it's been something that you've been able to continue to prioritize as well, and not necessarily be hindering too much of an effect off the back of COVID. I know there's a few kind of junior or more mid-level engineers kind of on the call here who maybe don't necessarily have the experience that you do with things like GCP. What would you recommend as kind of their first ports of call for kind of becoming knowledgeable about this, and kind of what else is available to them?
Well, very good question. I would suggest start looking for some of the certification because that will give them a direction and the path to follow. Google have a very good resource available for that. There are courses available on Coursera and many other platforms. Even with the documentations, as I said earlier, Google has a very nice and detailed documentation, so start reading them if you would like to pursue onto that path. Google Cloud Associate Engineer would be the first one which I would suggest, and then looking for any of the professional. If you are keen going onto the infrastructure track, then architect is the way. And if someone is for the data, then data engineering. There are many other tracks as well, which are available on the certification.
Good stuff. Maybe if we could, as part of the when we put the link up and we send it to all the attendees, we'll maybe put some of those suggestions kind of beneath in the suggestion box for them too. There's another question that's just come in here. Might be worth you looking at this one, 'cause it's a slightly long one. Do you have much experience with serverless frameworks, even though it's independent of cloud platforms? Not sure if there's more configuration needed to get it working on GCP/AWS than just using Cloud Functions/Lambda directly.
Well, in terms of the usage, it doesn't require huge amount of the configurations. To make it productionize, yes, there are a few bits, because as the number of functions goes up to a certain limit, then making them or handling them, associating with them, that will be in a slightly thing which we need to take care of when we start preparing for the production level functions.
Okay, good stuff. A follow-up question as well. Did you have any cost benefit in your enterprise level project using serverless?
Well, currently in the current role, I mean, I have a very limited visibility how we are using the serverless. But from my experience, I have seen benefit. Benefit, as I said, on the enterprise level, yes, definitely. It's really good for creating a proof of concept or a small thing, because it gives us an isolation. And also, we need not to put in a capital investment right behind.
Stuff. We'll just give 30 seconds or so to see if anything else comes in. Don't want to miss anyone out. Hopefully that is all from everyone. So for those of you that have attended, what we do, we have recorded this. So we will send you all a recording so you can go over it. And then if Dheeraj is okay with it, we'll put one of his personal emails there that you can send him any additional questions that you may have with it as well. And of course, we'll be doing more of these kind of tales and techs throughout the year until we can meet up in person for an event later on, which hopefully won't be too long, although I have my apprehensions about that at this stage. But look, thank you very much for joining, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And thank you, Dheeraj.
Thank you.